Hi, my name is Rachel Coyne. I'm the Executive Chief of Staff here at Texas RE. I also manage the standards program here at Texas RE. We'll just start with the antitrust admonition. I'm not going to read it, but the main thing is that if you have any questions about the antitrust admonition, please contact the Texas RE General Counsel. Okay, so if you're brand new to NERC reliability standards, what do you need to know? So I was trying to think of the very basic information that you would need to know. So we'll go over what are reliability standards, how to find reliability standards and navigate NERC's website in that way. And lastly, we'll end with talking about how standards are developed. So at a basic level, here's the definition of a reliability standard. This is from the NERC glossary and the rules of procedure. You can see it's a lot of words, but it basically boils down to what is in green. So it's a requirement to provide for reliable operation of the bulk power system. And just some more information about standards. We have approximately 79 reliability standards. This changes periodically based on standards development activities. This covers over 1,600 requirements and requirement parts. It covers critical infrastructure protection, or CIP, standards, as well as operations and planning standards. These are the NERC reliability standards categories. You may hear them referred to as standards families. This covers everything from communications to modeling data and analysis to transmission planning. You'll hear Texas RE and others refer to the three-letter acronym on the left-hand side. And then we have the critical infrastructure protection standards. So this does warrant its own slide. Texas RE has a whole department dedicated to CIP standards, and I believe most registered entities do as well. So this covers everything from BES cybersecurity system categorization to system security management to supply chain risk management, as well as those firewalls that you see the graphic there. So we know kind of what standards are now. So now I'm going to show you where to find them on NERC's website. So this is the NERC homepage, just nerc.com. Along the top there, you'll see a lot of different drop-down menus. So we'll select standards. And this brings you to what I'll call the standards landing page. So this has all the information regarding reliability standards. If you are going to be working in this space, I would recommend familiarizing yourself with all of these links. Everything on the left-hand side is a link. I don't have time to go over all of those today, but I will show you a few of those. And then there are some links on the right-hand side too that can be helpful too. So I just recommend kind of clicking around and getting to know what information is there. So I will start with the one-stop shop. This is a rather large spreadsheet, so I couldn't get a whole screenshot of it, but I did want to explain what it is because this one's really helpful. So it does show the US status of the standard. So that is whether it's inactive, subject to mandatory enforcement, or awaiting FERC approval. It has the purpose of the standard, the effective date of the standard, a link to the standard language, a link to the project page, a link to the implementation plan. There's a note whether there's phased-in implementation. There's a link to the RSAW and a link to lessons learned and compliance guidance if those are applicable. So what this spreadsheet does not show is any phased-in implementation dates, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but basically there might be a standard where one requirement, the first requirement might be effective 7/1/2025. The second requirement might be effective 7/1/2026. This spreadsheet does not show that granularity. It only shows the effective date for the entire standard. And then lastly, this spreadsheet is not a comprehensive list of all standards throughout NERC history. The spreadsheet was developed a few years ago, and it was really forward-looking at that time. So to find the actual standards language, so you'll go to column B, which is a link to the standard itself. It brings up a PDF document. Every standard has a title, a number, a purpose, applicability. If you keep scrolling, section B is the requirements and measures. This is what is referred to as the black language of the standard. This is what entities are responsible for compliance with. And then I also wanted to show applicability. Not every entity is subject to all standards, so it really does depend on what function you are registered for. I believe there is a Reliability 101 presentation for registration, which goes over that information. But but depending what standard, what function you are, will determine which standards are applicable. And there is another way to figure that out. If you know your applicability, you don't have to click through every PDF of the standard. There's another spreadsheet that is also very helpful. So this is the US effective date status functional applicability spreadsheet. Again, couldn't get a screenshot because it was so large, but this spreadsheet does complement the first spreadsheet, the one-stop shop, very well. This is a comprehensive list of all standards throughout NERC history. If you're needing some of that historical information, you can filter on the status, so inactive, subject to mandatory enforcement, or awaiting FERC approval. This has the requirement text, so if you're needing that in spreadsheet form, it has the actual text of the requirement language. It has the filing date. This is the date that NERC filed it with FERC. It has the regulatory order effective date, the date that FERC approved it, and then the effective date of any requirement or parts or phased in compliance. That's what I was talking about. If you may have some requirement and parts that have kind of a phased in schedule, and then any applicable functions. So if you're registered as a transmission operator, you can filter on TOP and just get the list of standards applicable to transmission operators. So the implementation plan, you've heard me mention it. It is a standalone document, but it is also considered one of the enforceable parts of the standard. And the standard does refer to this standalone document. So this document shows the proposed effective date, any new or modified definitions or terms within the standard, whether there are any prerequisite actions needed to be accomplished before entities are held responsible for compliance, whether there's any conforming changes needed to already approved standards, and the functional entities identified. So how to find the implementation plan? The best way to do that is to go back to the one-stop shop and look at the column L. There is a link to the implementation plan, and it brings up a PDF document with all the information that I just mentioned. Lastly, I wanted to show you the glossary of terms. So I've kind of mentioned definitions and terms throughout this presentation. When you're reading through the standard, you'll notice that certain terms are capitalized. That is an indication that it is part of the glossary of terms and it is a FERC-approved definition. And so if you go back to the landing page, it's on the left-hand side, there's a link and it brings up this PDF. If you keep scrolling, all the terms are in alphabetical order. Okay, so now we've talked about where to find the standards. Let's talk about how we get standards. How are they developed? So it is part of the Rules of Procedure, Appendix 3A to the Rules of Procedure, the Standard Processes Manual. This does govern the process for developing NERC reliability standards. The process is somewhat unique in that it does use stakeholders to develop standards. This is very high level, and so I would encourage you to read the NERC Standards Processes Manual if you want more granularity, but at a minimum, the standard authorization request is submitted and it goes through a process of drafting, commenting, voting. And I want to note here that this is after a standard drafting team is approved. So the standard drafting team will draft the standard. The standard drafting team is made up of industry representatives, and then they'll post the standard for a public comment and voting. This may happen a few times, it may only happen once, but there is an opportunity for industry to provide feedback to the drafting team. And it may go through several iterations before getting to a draft that passes and it's a 2/3 majority. Once that happens, the standard goes to the NERC board for adoption and then ultimately to FERC for approval. And I just kind of want to show you where some of that information is. So balloting and commenting, again, on the left side of our standards landing page, this is a snapshot in time. So it shows, if you look at it today, it'll show you what is out there today that is open for a public comment or ballot or to join the ballot pool. So it'll look different, depending on the date. The other spot I wanted to show you was the reliability standards under development. That shows all standards under development, regardless of whether or not they have an open comment period at that point in time or not. Every project has a project page, and so I took Project 2024-03 revisions to EOP 12 as an example. So every page looks pretty similar. So you'll have the status, the background information, the standards affected, the purpose or industry need. If you keep scrolling, that's where you get into what's going on with the standard. So in this case, it was posted for a comment period. So you can see it on the left. We'll just go left to right. Typically, you'll have a clean and redline version of the standard. You'll have a clean and redline version of the implementation plan. This was after a couple of iterations, so it's not the first draft of any of these. There might be some supporting materials. These are the ones relevant to this particular project, but it could change depending on the project. Then you have what the action is. So in this case, it was a comment period. There was no ballot associated with it. The dates, this one ended March 12th, 2025. And then I wanted to point out the consideration of comments. At the time I took the screenshot, it was not available, but once the drafting team reviews the comments in response to the comments, they'll be posted here so everybody can see it. So if you had a comment on requirement R1, you can look and see how the drafting team responded. And you can also look and see if you were curious how another entity commented, you could see what they commented and how the drafting team commented on that as well. Then I just wanted to show you the standards balloting system just to show you that it exists. So if you're a registered voter for your organization, this is where you would go to submit your vote and your comments. But there is a public portion of this. So if you wanted to see comments submitted in real time, if you're really curious, you know, for a particular project, what comments are coming in, you can go look here. There's a whole other slide deck for this system, so I'm not going to go over that right now. I just wanted to let people know it existed. Regional standards go beyond, add detail to, or cover matters not addressed in NERC reliability standards. There's one regional standard in Texas RE. It's the BAL1 TRE version 2, primary frequency response in the ERCOT region. And Texas RE has its own regional standards development process document. This is a FERC approved document, and it is somewhat akin to the NERC standards processes manual. So just ways that you can know what's going on. Of course, I linked the standard balloting and commenting webpage that shows what's out currently for comment. You can subscribe to the NERC standards mailing list. That will send you an email anytime there is a public posting of a standard. The weekly standards compliance and enforcement bulletin is a really good kind of comprehensive view of what's upcoming effective, what is currently posted, what drafting team meetings are happening in the near future, what workshops are happening in the near future. This is typically sent out on Monday mornings. And then the drafting team meetings. So I mentioned that the drafting team is open to industry, so you can certainly be nominated to serve on a drafting team. If you're not on a drafting team, all of the meetings are public. So if there's a project you're particularly interested in, you can attend those meetings as well, even if you're not an official member of the team. And then lastly, NERC and the drafting teams are really good about outreach for their projects. So usually at least once during the project, there will be a webinar, and that's a really good opportunity to hear directly from the drafting team. They'll present what they did and why, and then there's typically a Q&A session at the end, so you can actually ask them questions directly. We do have two stakeholder groups in this region. So the NERC Standards Review Forum, or NSRF, this discusses OMP NERC reliability standards projects under development. There's a Texas Q&A section of that. You can join the mailing list or see our webpage for more information. And then there's also a SIP working group. So this discusses cybersecurity issues, including SIP reliability standards. And you can visit ERCOT SIP webpage for more information on that. And these are both really good to just kind of stay up to date on what's going on, as well as maybe meet fellow industry participants. Just wanted to give a list of resources here. I went through all of these today, so I just wanted to link them, but you should hopefully be familiar with how to navigate NERC's website a little bit easier today after my presentation. And this concludes my standards development presentation. If you have any questions, please contact us.